Trying to figure out how we fund these schools.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
A couple evenings ago, we had a good brawl here on the program with the executive director of the charter school organization in the state, not the mayoral academies, but the remaining charter schools, or the previous charter schools in a lot of cases, and the executive director of the School Committees Association, as they really got after each other on funding formulas and a proposal now to reduce funding to charter schools if the charter schools aren't performing, and their constitutionality arguments and all that kind of thing. And so I decided, after hearing that argument, that I would tap our lieutenant governor, who has been a leading advocate of A, charter schools, B, different funding formulas, and has been since his mayoralty in Cumberland 10 years ago. And you know, it's kind of his thing, man. Just play around and golf with him, and you'll find out by the 12th hole how to change the entire American educational system. In the meantime, let's check in. So we'll have Dan McKee coming up momentarily. In the meantime, hey, big happenings in New Hampshire last night. You know, one of the interesting things about this outcome is that there were more Democrats to go to the polls than in the previous two presidential cycles, which tells you that there is some passion out there amongst Democrats. Here's what the network had.
Bernie Sanders has won the popular vote in the first two contests in the race for the Democratic presidential nomination.
This victory here is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
The Vermont senator who beat Hillary Clinton soundly in the New Hampshire primary 4 years ago only narrowly defeated former Mayor Pete Buttigieg. CBS News estimates they'll each win 9 of the Granite State's 24 delegates, which means Buttigieg remains the top delegate holder. Coming in a surprise third was Senator Amy Klobuchar, beating out both Senator Elizabeth Warren and former Vice President Joe Biden.
Hello, America. I'm Amy Klobuchar, and I will beat Donald Trump.
CBS News exit polls found that half of Democratic primary voters decided on their candidate in the last few days, and 29% went with Buttigieg, 24% chose Klobuchar. Anticipating a poor showing, Biden left the state before the results were announced to campaign in South Carolina. Both he and Warren are emphasizing the nomination process is much larger than 2 states.
Our campaign is built for the long haul.
It ain't over, man. We're just getting started.
Biden believes he can do well with the more diverse voter pools in Nevada and South Carolina. That's also on the mind of Buttigieg, who has struggled to attract African-American voters.
I think the key is, first of all, to demonstrate that we are the campaign that can defeat Donald Trump. It is the top priority for so many Black and Latino voters that I speak to. Buttigieg
and the other candidates will put that to the test in the next contest.
All right, so a couple of takeaways. What's interesting here is that the moderate vote was larger than the progressive vote. So when they work this thing out, and they better work it out sooner than later, Super Tuesday is kind of a deadline with Mike Bloomberg looming with all his dough. He'll be on those ballots. If they don't get down to a candidate that the country can review and get behind, it's going to be a problem for Democrats. And all the talk about competitive issues, how it's great for the process, doesn't bear out. I'm interested to hear what the lieutenant governor says about this, because he's a political guy, and actually said some things yesterday on the radio regarding Bernie Sanders that intrigued me. In the meantime, what's really fascinating is 6 out of 10 voters in New Hampshire in the exit polls said that they were voting for somebody who could beat Donald Trump and didn't necessarily consider whether they were aligned with a candidate, which goes to my point. So it's really going to be a fascinating take with the Democrats. In the meantime, you know, he cleared the bar of impeachment, and people wondered whether or not he changed his behavior. This headline indicates no, he didn't. Roger Stone, his pal, who's jammed up on 7 to 9 years of potential sentence, oh, no, he isn't, not anymore, because the Justice Department just said, hey, throw out what we formerly suggested ought to be the sentence, and please reduce it, Your Honor, by a significant amount of time. 3 prosecutors quit the case, 1 quit the Justice Department. This is, I'm not going to say it's a Saturday Night Massacre, but I will tell you the president's tweeting and his feigning his urging the Justice Department to do so, and then his congratulations to the Justice Department. You know, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. He is now meddling in that environment in a way that has poisoned the Justice Department. Anybody can see it from a mile away, and nobody's got the energy to restart the engines on oversight with the president. You know what the oversight is? The 2020 election. In the meantime, on our subject matter for tonight, so here's a minute excerpt from a little battle royal that happened with our 2 guests. Keith Oliveira on the left, who heads up the charter system in the state, and the head of the School Committees Association, Tim Duffy, on the question of this reduction of funding for charters in this proposed redo of school funding, reduction of funding to charters if they don't perform.
What they're saying is, if a kid goes to a charter school that is underperforming, as undefined underperforming, then they may get up to 50% less than a kid that would go to a district school. That's disparate treatment. What you're saying is this kid's going to get less towards his public education than a peer that go to a district school would get. That's disparate treatment. And that disparate treatment would, in our view, violate their equal protection rights under the Constitution. That's what makes it unconstitutional. Because
yeah, I do disagree. Because education is not a constitutional right.
In Rhode Island.
No, in the United States it's not.
Sure,
no, it isn't. No, it isn't. You didn't read San Antonio versus Rodriguez.
Well, we have a litigation going on right now.
It is a right to access public education.
Tim, do you support this in a litigation on the constitutional right for a child to have an education?
I support it to the extent we haven't filed an amicus brief, but I understand it. It's around the constitutional issue that Thurgood Marshall articulated in Rodriguez, San Antonio versus Rodriguez. You're going to read that, Keith.
We're talking about access.
Hui.
Donnybrook.
Well, you know what's interesting? If there's going to be some passionate debate on this matter, that's a good thing. It gets people to pay attention, don't you think?
Absolutely.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee here. The mayoral academies, which in large part you more than helped to start, are not included in Mr. Oliveira's organization. The Mayoral Academy, Black Snow Valley Prep, Achievement First in Providence and Cranston, and the third
Rice Prep in
Woonsocket.
And John Kelly at Meeting Street too used the statute to open up a mayoral academy.
And the Mayoral Academy, so we can just get this defined, is defined as versus the other charter schools, which are defined as. Do that for me.
So the statute the governance model is led by mayors and other people that represent the communities that they draw from. It's a regional strategy. And it also has certain criteria that it gives pay scale strategies that it leave up to the schools. It doesn't participate in the state pension plan. It has its own 401k, Social Security, and that it gives more flexibility in terms of the management of the schools than the district schools.
And these, for lack of a better term, traditional public schools that are under the auspice of the league that Keith Oliveira, the first gentleman in that video, represent. They're unionized. They're part of the public school system.
Yeah, they're a combination. So there's some that don't necessarily have the union district school contract that they have to abide by, but most of them do.
And how many are we talking about? Do you know?
I think it's like 13 that probably in Keith's organization.
Do you support the idea of those charter schools being supported?
Yes.
The non-mayoral academies I'm talking about, Keith's organization.
I think that school choice is an important factor. I do also believe that outcomes are important to be measured in a way, regardless if you're in a charter, a mayoral academy, or a district school.
Did you get what they were arguing about?
Yeah, so
give me the short answer, then we'll break it down.
Yeah, so I think what they're arguing about is treating kids that are in charter schools differently than you're treating kids in district schools.
Leave it there. When we come back, we're going to talk about the history of financing the school system, where we are now, and what the proposal is. Stay with us. Okay, well that's a little premature. That is a report that was done in the mid-2000s for a refunding, but we have another headline there, Kev, which we could probably use on school funding changes, and that's what we're looking at right now. So I'm going to go back to that particular headline momentarily. It's okay. Sometimes we mess up our graphics. Can you throw that headline up, guys, if you just so we know where we are? Anyway, let me know when you get it. In the meantime, we have a proposal. A whole commission through the Senate, and Senator Ryan Pearson has been working on changes, fundamental changes to the way we fund the education system here in the state. But I think before we get to that, we should go backwards a little bit and talk about what we had. And I guess we could put that out. The screen that we had up there was a reference to it. You guys, as mayors and other key players like the Rhode Island Foundation, put together a report in the mid-2000s that fundamentally changed the way we fund schools, correct?
Yeah,
that helped to inspire the changes that came legislatively.
Commissioned by the nonprofit Rhode Island Mayoral Academy Association, and we went outside and got a public impact to do a report that ended up being the template for a new funding formula back in 2010.
In the old days, you just kept funding a system and giving it 2 or 3% increase every year, and just kept funding it and didn't really recognize what the dynamic changes were inside the system, right?
What's getting lost in this discussion is how bad we were prior to having a formula. Millions and millions of dollars weren't going to communities like Providence, Johnston, Cumberland, Warwick, Cranston, Pawtucket. Millions of dollars because you didn't have a formula. So first of all, that was one of the most landmark pieces of policy legislation that the state has had on education in 50 years.
When you say we didn't have a formula, you had to have a formula. It might have been a bad formula.
They didn't have a formula.
It was a habit.
No, what they had was you got X amount of dollars one year, and then they just created, we're going to add 3% to everybody the next year, or 1% or 2%.
Well, what was the foundational money? I mean,
the foundational
this is
money,
not infinity. I mean, it started from somewhere.
Yeah, it was just an allocation of funds that started and proceeded, and when people regionalized, they got a little bonuses, and then the need maybe in Central Falls and more dollars.
So there was no uniformity to it.
There was zero uniformity.
Okay, so the formula that we have now, which is being reviewed and with proposed changes legislatively, in essence, is what?
Yeah, so
it works how?
What now is that the money follows the child, right? The state money we're talking about, and those dollars are determined by student counts, the number of students you have in your district, the type of students you have, the low income, free and reduced lunch. There's a whole bunch of variables.
Special needs.
Special needs to a degree. I don't think as much as what we requested back in 2009. I want to talk about that a little bit.
Which is something I think upsets Tim Duffy from the School Committee Association.
It does, but this shows you, that conversation the other day and the tension in that conversation shows you that this is not necessarily all about equitable funding, right? Because it's about, remember, Senator Pearson's from Cumberland. We know his objectives has been to hurt mayoral academies for years, and people who actually align with him. So the idea of the O'Grady Commission that happened 5 years ago was all really geared at hurting mayoral academies and trying to reduce funding from them. That's a fact. So if we were so what's happening today, Senator Pearson's objective is to, as Nick as Keith said, is to hurt all charters, right? With a strategy there. If you really want to solve the problem, go back to what our position and my position was in 2009. If special need, high cost education for a certain level of students is a real issue, then you should fund that on a statewide basis so that local districts would pay up to a certain amount, but over a certain amount, they don't blow out their budgets because of this. That's the conversation you should have. It shouldn't be, let's figure out a strategy to take money away from kids that are going to public schools and which in essence will hurt those public schools to satisfy this problem. You have an issue,
okay, let's go backwards. Right now we have a follow the pupil formula. So with the success of academies, like the mayoral academies, and to a certain extent some of the charter schools, when Johnny and Mary leave the mainstream school system to the public charter school, the per pupil, say it's $10,000 or $12,000, goes with them to the charter school. The mainstream school systems have been arguing lately with this exodus, because it seems like as many seats are created in those charter schools, they are filled by families who want their kids to be following the success formula of the education, the curriculum, and all that the school systems are being eroded. That is the argument.
False, by the way, certainly can push back really high on that.
You know, listen,
let's push back on that.
I say this figuratively. You created a monster in the sense that charter schools are so doggone successful right now that at some point you've got to revisit the formula.
So they're creating through the policymakers, Ryan Pearson being one of them, they're creating a financial argument, right, to drain money from the charters, which in essence will destroy the charters.
He would suggest, during the reading, that he would suggest, and I think we have him perhaps coming in next week. We've invited the senator in here to talk to us about it. Say Blackstone Valley Prep, which was your baby. It's performing so well. I think based on the proposal that's going through the legislature right now, that could cut charter school funding by as much as 50% if the charter is underperforming.
Yes.
The data not yet determined to determine that, but if the charter school is underperforming the district, they would get penalized up to 50%.
Which is a real
funding. But Blackstone Valley
ridiculous proposal, right?
Right, because what it does is
let's destroy those schools so the money somehow we satisfy the status quo protection that goes on.
Understood,
right?
but like BVP probably wouldn't be affected because it's outperforming the public schools.
Well, it depends how you do it. Remember, it's regional. So if you look at the school in entirety and compare that against one district, the total there could be lower. But when you compare Cumberland students to Cumberland students, Lincoln students to Lincoln students.
For instance, Cumberland's a big
it's in the details.
Yeah, Cumberland's a big feeding district to BVP.
Yes.
And has done very well. In fact, you would suggest, and I would agree, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the pressure and competitive issues that the BVP has presented itself, in part, has a lot to do with the success of the public schools in Cumberland.
And that,
right?
Yes, and if you had a voice to argue against the idea that I destroyed, that was the argument. Back in 2008, 2009, I was accused of potentially destroying my school district. We haven't run a deficit since the mayoral academies opened up. We've only improved, and we've gone from the back half of the state to the top half of the state in 10 years in terms of outcomes. So the argument, Dan, that somehow that the financial drain, which I don't believe there is one, you're educating kids, has actually created a negative impact on the Cumberland School District, it's absolutely false.
I don't think it's a bad thing to review the mechanisms. This proposal is just, it just doesn't make any, it's counterintuitive and productive to I think what you ought to do is not be passive aggressive. If a school is underperforming, close it. Don't bleed it dry by cutting half its funding.
Yeah, and that's part of the, I think that,
right?
Yes, I think that it was brought up that there's a renewal process that's pretty strong, right? So if schools are not doing well, they shouldn't exist the same way they're existing today. But I would apply the same thing to the district schools, the charter schools, the mayoral academies. We got to expect better in our schools. And this argument that is being made currently, that's was discussed with Tim Duffy and Keith Olivera the other day, you're really ignoring the issues that you should be talking about. If special need kids, high cost kids are an issue, then let's address that globally. Don't start picking and choosing where you're going to take the funds.
They get hung up on this constitutional right for an education. I think without that adjudication, you've been able to restructure the funding formula to improve the school systems. Do we need some judicial declaration that a student has a fundamental right to education? Do we need that?
I think it would be good if you had it, but I think you have to be careful about what the purpose of it is. If it's to sue local communities to pay more money when we're already spending a great deal of money on education, that's not a good objective. So I think you've got to be careful about it, okay. but I think it's worth the conversation.
The other dirty little secret is that some school systems, because of just the ebb and flow of birth rates and the migration to charter schools, have empty seats.
Many, many do.
And the teacher unions are not ready to, that's the dirty little secret in Rhode Island education
And
right
it's
now.
not all caused by charters. You go to districts that don't have charters and they're down 1,000 seats.
Because of cycles of birth rate and...
That's correct.
Yeah.
And yet that's why the foundational type of funding that was in place 10 years ago didn't work. Because systems that were losing thousands of kids were still getting the same base amount plus a percentage. And it never took into consideration either a increase of student body or decrease. And that's why the thing that's being missed here is that this change in the school funding formula, it brought $40 million into Providence, almost $10 million into Pawtucket. Johnston, $4 million that they weren't getting. Cumberland, $5 million. That was a really important piece of legislation. Today, if you want to address it, we just suggested back in 2009 in the report that we did, ELA students, special needs students, high cost students, let's address that in a way
with a precision.
Yes, let's address that without trying to attack or hurt any kids that are in the school system, including charters.
A little bit of politics when we come back. Stay with us. Boston Globe just did a piece on potential candidates for governor in 2022. You're on that list. Not much money in your bank account right now, but you've got an announcement come up in a couple of weeks. People are wondering what the specificity of it is. What is it?
Well, as I've answered the question, I think on this show and others, look, I'm preparing to run for governor, but I'm not making any formal announcements right now. And the event that I'm having, we're calling it Let's Play 2 in 2022, or in the primaries coming up right now. I really believe that we're at risk of and I think that they outlined it in the presidential debate the other night, of a democratic socialist agenda. And I know that that is a dominant one in the primaries just because of the election I just had, right? And I ran against the Bernie Sanders clone, right?
Activist crowd, they come out and primaries.
They come out and vote. So Let's Play 2 is just a simple strategy we're going to use for the next year plus of talking to people about, if you want a sensible agenda, if you want a sensible Democrat to kind of move forward, in terms of just a common sense type of people, you got to play both in the general election and the primary. And if you just show up in the primary, then in the general election, you're not going to have a choice, because what comes out of the Democratic primary will be your options. So what we're saying is, look, in the primary, 100,000 people vote in the Democratic primary. In the general, 300,000 people vote. There's 200,000 people that should be aware that they are not making the decision on who they're electing statewide. It's happening with these 100,000 people. So it's time for the 200,000 people to join the 100,000 people and then have more people vote in the primary. So that's the Let's Play 2 strategy that we're going to be talking about. And we're going to be planting that all around the state, every community, because there are a lot of people who feel as though they're definitely been shoved out of the Democratic Party. Did you come up with that, by the way?
You're nothing like me. You're nothing but a dumb jock when it comes right to it. Anyway, that's the baseball analogy. Is that yours? Did you
baseball, and it's an interesting Pearl Jam analogy, because Pearl Jam ran a concert at Wrigley Field in 2017, the year they won the World Series, called Let's Play 2.
Well, there you go.
So we take care of the jocks and the musicians.
There'll be time for that. Final word when we come back. All right, coming up tomorrow, perhaps even more follow-up on this education stuff, because it's really, really important. We'll talk to you on the radio at 3 until 6 tomorrow on WPRO. Thanks for tuning in.